In this lesson, we're going to use Photoshop to combine a few images and create a custom map for the terrain. Now, the terrain is going to be this entire block that we created. So it's that mesh from which we cut the driveway, and we also have the sea down in the bottom. So we have a whole lot of different elements around the building and so forth that we want to create a custom texture for. Now, if you had a very simple site and you were in a big rush, you could just go ahead and create a standard V-Ray material and put a ordinary grass texture into your diffuse. Or if you want to be a little bit more fancy, you could create a blend material where you go and put two different types of grass textures and you have a clouds black and white mask that would be basically creating a mixture of the two in different patchy areas. So this would be the route that I would most likely use for a very simple terrain and a simple project. Our project has a little bit more terrain to deal with, so we're going to create that custom map that we mentioned. Now, the first thing that you need to consider and think about if you are working at that scale is you want to decide whether you want to create one single map for the entire object or whether you want to segment it up. Now, if you had a look at any of the other courses that I've done for digital tutors, there is one called Creating an Optimized Architectural Visualization in 3D Max and V-Ray. That's the one that has got the 3 towers with the soccer stadium sitting on top. When we did that project, we segmented the entire site mesh into about 16 blocks, I believe, and each one of those blocks had their own diffuse and reflection texture. So that is a course that you can look at if you want to go more into the detail of a really big site. In our case, what we're going to do is something similar but a lot more simple. We're going to have a look in plan view, and we're just going to choose the polygon select, and we're going to draw a square around the building itself. Then we're going to type C on our keyboards and just go through your camera views and try to see whether all of the areas in your foregrounds are selected in red. So here we need to grow the selection by 1. Let's have a look at the other views. Here we still see a bit of gray, so let's grow it again. And here we're looking okay. That little part over there doesn't really matter because it's quite far in the distance. The other views are perfectly fine, and the view down here where we can see the ocean, we know that the split will be along this line, but in most cases if you were doing this, you would have some kind of photo from the beach area so you could combine photos of what this landscape looks like in reality. You wouldn't want to do all of this in 3D because it would be not very realistic in the end. So let's go now to our top view and let's just go and detach all of these polys. And we're detaching it so that we can apply a separate texture just to this portion here at a higher resolution, and then a low resolution texture for this entire square around it. Now let's select the two objects and let's also include the portion underneath the sea. And in your modifier list, just go down to your UV unwrap. For you, it's going to be just off screen underneath twist. So select UV or unwrap UVW, open your UV editor, and within there you don't need to do any work besides just go to your tools and then render UVW template. You can choose a size which is quite large so that you can see the actual resolution of the squares. And you can then render a UV template. That's going to render out this for you. You can then save this, and this can now go into your project files, and you can create a site texture template. And that can be a PNG. Now I'm going to pause the video and open this file up in Photoshop, and then we're going to continue from there. So I've opened up a whole lot of files now in Photoshop, and we're going to start working on this. So first of all, this is the template that was rendered out. It has an alpha, so that's why you don't see much. So let's add an extra layer and add a black fill to that layer. And now if you zoom in, you'll see that this is your template. I'm just zooming in and panning around. So that green line is where we split our mesh in two, and that's the area that we're going to be using for the high-res template. The area down here is where we're going to do the ocean, and pretty much this gives you a good idea of what your mesh looks like at a good high resolution. Next we have the image of the project itself, and this is going to show you the landscape. It's going to show you exactly what's happening inside the house, so you can start to actually work on the terrain, the image or the terrain mesh image from the reference of looking at the building itself. So let's go and take this and we're going to drag it on, and then we're going to scale it up so that we have the two in alignment. The other thing you can do is this, you can rename it to template. That's going to be a mesh template, and we can lock this down since we want to make sure that that doesn't move. So here you can just scale it up and down, and I'm going to just do that off camera as well. In the meantime, I just want to show you some of the other images that we have. This one I'm going to redo since the scale got accidentally changed. And obviously when I'm scaling up and down, I'm holding down a shift so that I lock my aspect ratio. Next, I just want to go through the images that are going to be brought onto this image. And first is a image that has the sea, the beach, and a little bit of vegetation that we're not really worried about. We mainly want to have the beach and the sea connection. Here we have an image with a bit of a hillside that has grass and a couple of plants, and this we're going to use on the slope. Here we have one with a little bit of grass and a couple of rocks, so this can be a drier environment. Then we have a grass from very far away, so this is a sort of a large scale, and then we have a zoomed in version of grass that we can use just around the building itself where we do those close-up shots. So I'm going to pause the video now, and I'm just going to drag all of these separate images onto this file and scale them so that they more or less make sense with the scale of my mesh, and then from there we can carry on with the video having a look at how we blend everything together. So now I have all of the textures on the actual site mesh template. I have gone and scaled the Photoshop image that we have underneath, so we can see more or less where the trees are aligned, and we can see all of that. We can also see that the ocean isn't exactly in the right place on this image, but that doesn't really matter because it was just representative anyway, but at least it gives us information that we need for now. The other thing is that we have all of the other grass textures around the site. This one is a large one, so we have it at a huge scale, and this one is a more detailed texture at a higher resolution, so we have it in this position here where we're going to be viewing some of the close-up areas. So what I'm going to do now is just to give you an example of how to start merging all of these images together on your file, and then I'm going to go and do it off camera and then show you the end result. So first of all, let me get started with this ocean file here. Because the ocean is running in this direction, I'm going to flip this horizontally, and then I'm going to try and align it as closely as possible as I can to the actual site outline. So that green line there, it's very, very faint for you perhaps, but that's the edge of the sea. So more or less this image, just by total luck, ends up being exactly what I want it to be, so I don't really need to worry about the edge too much. So now the process is the same. You're going to click on this button here, which adds a layer mask. Then you're going to take a black paint and a black on your paintbrush. You right click and you just keep increasing your diameter, and then you basically start painting away the areas that you don't want. The great thing about adding the layer mask is you don't actually lose your image, you're just adding a mask to it, which means that you can come in here and regain your image in areas that you want to keep it in. So next I'm going to work in this image over here. This is the one that has the crossover between the sand and the grass. So I'm going to hold down Control as I just reshape this image to try and get it to be more in perspective. In other words, I'm going to try and undo the perspective that there is. So you basically just stretch it out until you have something that looks a little bit more orthogonal, and you can then rotate it and get it into your scene. And let me just give that another go. You also have the choice of right-clicking and going to perspective and seeing whether you can adjust any of the distortion there. Generally, it would be better to get an image that doesn't already have this type of perspective in it, because editing it afterwards is always going to be more difficult. So anyhow, I'm just going to use the image as is because I don't necessarily want to spend any time rotating and twisting images around. I'm rather just going to apply it into the right place, rotate it slightly, perhaps enlarge it a little bit, and then apply that same custom mask. and paint out the areas that I don't want. This is going to allow me to use portions of this image that I can then tile around, and this can all get merged together. So I'm just painting out the edges so that they're not visible, and I'm now going to take that same image and I'm just going to copy it, holding down Control and Alt. Then if you just hold down Control, you can pretty much have control over each of the points. So I'm going to now continue with this process. The same thing happens for all of the grass elements. You continue to copy, rotate, merge, brush away all of the elements until you're completely finished. So now you can either choose to add this on top of the grass. So for example, you could drag this layer all the way to the top of your layer stack, and you could add a few patches of drier grass. You could add the grass over here, and you could basically just make a whole collage for yourself, merging all these images just how I have done here. So I'm going to put the video on pause now, and then I'm going to show you the end result for the last second of this lesson. So now all of those images have been copied and merged together. I'm going to turn on each of them individually. This is the one with the beach and the sea, the beach and the grass, the rough dry grass, all of the large-scale grass, and then finally the high-res grass, which is just around the building itself. Now what I'm going to do is stop the lesson at this point, and we're going to have a look in the next lesson how we can save out this image and then apply it to our model in 3D Max. So hang on for that directly in the next lesson.